It all goes back to, I think, when we were leaving Russia back in the 80s. My dad wasn't willing to preach what the KGB told him to preach. And there were night after night where we didn't know if he was going to come home or, from after the service, if the KGB was going to pick him up, and we'd never see him again. But he knew what he believed in, and he was not going to compromise. I believe that's where my values come from, was really my dad. We ended up having to leave. So my parents, with an elderly aunt and 6 kids, we put what little we had in suitcases and boarded a train. And we were on that train for what seemed like forever, really in search of a place where we could go and live our values. We were on the train for a long time, arrived in Austria, lived there for a while, lived in northern Italy for a while, and then we moved to Rome. I was about 6 to 7 years old at the time, and we had to find a way to make ends meet. And I remember at that age, I figured it out, and I found a Coke bottle, an empty Coke bottle, and I saw that the cars driving by, the roads were super bad, and the cars driving by had mud on their headlights. So I found a rag somewhere, and I found this Coke bottle, put some water in it, and I started working the street corners. Literally at every stoplight, you get your opportunity to hit up the cars and go and wash in headlights. And even without knowing the language, I saw a need, especially with the days closing out, everybody's going home, it's about to get dark. I saw the need and found a way to get that solution across, even without knowing the language. When we get to the States, it was a reality check. We're in the airport, and really no idea, like, we're in this new country, no language, no culture, nothing, have no clue what's going on, where we are. And somehow my dad is able to make a phone call to somebody, a friend that he had made in Italy. And he calls the guy up, tells him where we're at, and they connect. Next thing I know, we're being driven from the airport to where these people lived. And it was a family, I believe, of a family of 5 who lived in a 1-bedroom apartment. And they took in a family of 9 people for the first little bit when we arrived. So we arrived in Springfield, Massachusetts, and that's like 14 people in a 1-bedroom apartment, a lot of kids. But really, I can't imagine what my parents must have went through. They just left everything they've ever known. All of their life was rendered down to 2 or 3 suitcases, 6 kids, elderly aunt that they were taking care of, and really not knowing day to day where we're going to go, what is life going to be like. Shortly thereafter, my dad found a job. We were able to find our own place, moved out, and we didn't move into the nicest part of town. And that was a real shock for us. Here we are, we come to the promised land, and we're not wanted at all. I remember we had to go walk to elementary school, and this was my first experience with school. And as we would walk the sidewalk, as we're walking to school, the neighborhood kids would come out and they would form a line and make it evidently obvious that you're not crossing this line. We don't want you here. Go back to where you came from. 4.5, 5 years in Massachusetts. We moved to Virginia. Small country town. Grew up there. Middle school went pretty fine. High school, couldn't wait to get out. I think they couldn't wait till I got out either. I tried college. As soon as I got out of high school, I tried college, and I think I was in it for maybe a month or two, maybe a month, made it a month. And it didn't work out. It didn't work out, and just had a desire for a change of scenery. And months prior, maybe a year prior, I was really into surfing, boogie boarding, and I met a guy on the waves who was from Missouri, and he said, "Hey, if you're ever in town, hit me up." And I was kind of in a spot where I wanted to change the scenery, so one day I got in my car and I decided to go to California. I wanted to check out the waves on the other coast, and via St. Louis, because this guy was there. So the plan was, stop in there, make a little fast cash, make enough gas money to make it to California, and keep going. And I get to St. Louis, and I start dabbling in construction. His brothers were in it, and we started working together. And next thing I know, I met his cousin, who's been my wife for 20 years now. So I never really made it to California on that trip. Kind of ended there. But as we progressed in construction, there was a lot of stuff happened. We had an accident where I got hit by a drunk driver, and overnight, everything that we had built, we were really at the peak of my career at the time, what we thought was the peak of my career at the time. We got some really good contracts, the crews were growing, we were experiencing what we believed to be financial success at the time. And overnight it was gone. I went from climbing ladders and building houses to not being able to walk. And through that journey of recovery, after surgery, I had an opportunity to go back to college, and I wanted to pursue engineering. During recovery, while I'm on all kinds of painkillers, crazy stuff, high as a kite, I was taking somewhere between 22 and 27 credit hours. So because of my surgery, because of recovery, I couldn't sit for longer than 15, 30 minutes at a time. And I remember literally laying down in between the aisles of chairs in class, laying on the floor, taking notes, various classes, and it was a pretty heavy workload. Towards the end of my college career, the last semester, I got a job offer that was for my dream job. That was what I was going to school for. Except there was a couple problems with the offer. A couple things happened. One, I couldn't sit longer than 15 minutes, and I'm in St. Louis, and the job offer is in Atlanta. And the other thing is I simply didn't have the health to perform the functions. And but another odd thing happened that, when I finished high school and the first time I went to college, I just didn't have the propensity to be book smart or learn that way. And when I got the opportunity to go to college, I feel like God just opened up my brain. And I was doing that many credit hours, and I have a plaque on my wall that says that I finished with a 4.0 plus. And that particular award that college gave, There's only a handful of people in the history of that college that have ever achieved that. So here's this job offer for my dream job that would take us from eating $1 pack of hot dogs and a 33-cent box of pasta that we'd been doing for 2 years now to make ends meet, and would throw me into six-figure right away. And we prayed about it, and we were facing, this was a challenging decision. One, I didn't have the health. Two, it's on the other side of the country. And three, I'm in college and I'm determined to finish. So we pray about it, and both my wife and I feel that this is the right move. And we have no clue how we're going to do it. Here I am taking high doses of painkillers just to be able to lay on the floor in college. And I have to get in, I can't sit for 15 minutes, and I have to get in the truck and make a 12-hour drive. But we basically said, God, if this is you, then we're game. But you're going to have to make it happen. So I woke up at 4 o'clock the next morning, and that was the first morning in years that I took no medicine. I get up, and my wife had to work, so I had to make the trip on my own. And I get to the truck, I put my hands on the handle and slide my butt in the seat. And the moment my butt hits the seat, my pain goes away, gone. And I made that drive pretty much nonstop except for gas in like 10 and a half, 11 hours. So when I started that job in Atlanta, we were renovating hotels up and down the East Coast. So really that job was being on the road 10 months out of the year. And we did that for 4 years. I pretty much started at the bottom of management, running job sites, project managing, and very quickly worked myself into kind of the inner core of the company. And that was a really cool group of guys to run with, kind of glean off of, and learn different perspectives on how to view things, how to do stuff. I truly believe that at the time, that was probably the smartest group of guys that I had an opportunity to work with. And after 4 years' time, my wife and I made the decision to move back to St. Louis. And one day I found myself on a multi-million square foot build in North Fort Worth. And we were involved in designing the plumbing and mechanical systems there. And it's in getting into that environment that was kind of the shift for me that I was chasing. Initially, I started out in residential, went into hospitality, commercial, small commercial. And here we are with an opportunity to participate in projects that are millions of square feet. We started dabbling in that, learning from it. And I remember just wanting to niche down, doing something that nobody else was doing. Because as we grew into the projects, we realized that they have this size work everywhere. What is it that we can do that nobody else can do? Prior to that project, I wasn't familiar with steam systems. And here we are, I'm involved in working with some really, really smart guys designing this state-of-the-art steam system for a company that's moving their production from Australia to Texas. And on that same project, I was introduced to compressed air. I remember meeting Quincy on that job site, and they took us out to lunch because they saw the work we were doing, they were impressed with the work, and they needed somebody to install their pipe. And we went out to lunch and started this relationship, kind of like, hey, we'll sell you the pipe if you guys will install it. And that evolved. the product, the challenge of learning how these systems work. And there wasn't very many people doing it. So I think the product itself attracted me. Going back to the hotels, I remember when PEX first came out or any kind of new product, we were really eager to be the first ones to try it out, to implement it. And I think that when we got introduced to this new product that you don't really see very often, it called my name. You know, it's like, this is something new and there's something to this system. There's something more. So the more we learned about it, we learned that, hey, this truly is a better way to do it. And as we started learning best practices and wrapping our minds around intentionality, not just installing compressors, but thinking about the long term, thinking about how are these machines going to run? How are they going to be serviced? It's down to, I remember we were having a discussion where there was a project we installed, and a year later they needed to make a change, and the technician calls up and he's like, hey, you guys installed this ball valve here and I need to move the compressor. I can close off the ball valve, but there's no way for me to take the pipe off the compressor. And that was like a light bulb moment. Oh, hey, we can do this better, right? So we can be a little more intentional, and we implemented a new process, between the end of the compressor, between the end of any piece of equipment, how do we maximize serviceability? How can we minimize downtime? And we've had all kinds of learning curves over the years, and I truly believe that there's no success without failure. The reason that we can experience success is because we've experienced a tremendous amount of failure, and it's those opportunities that are the field we learn in. My grandpa used to always say that we're too poor to buy cheap things. You take that and you couple it with my dad's value for uncompromising faith, and you apply that to our market, and it really means, why not do it right the first time? If there's a better way to do it, why not push the envelope? Here's an example, and I think this is where failure is so important, is that if you take, my iPhone 13, they started out with 1, they improved on 2, they improved on 3. So we're not saying that it's gonna be perfect forever, but what we do strive is we take our values, we start at the best of what we know how, with the belief system that it can be better, and we're gonna do it today. And you know what? Failure is gonna happen, and we're gonna learn from it, and that's where we learn how to make it even better, right? So we believe that breakdown is the place of breakthrough. As long as you learn from it, it's really having the end in mind. And the end in mind is making the world a better place. And you got, that's a really tall order. That's a really big goal. And we're a small company, so we need help. We can't do it on our own, right? So there's the idea of how can you take this big goal and meet it. So that would require intentionality, multiplication, and just exponential multiplication. I never dreamt or thought that we'd go past the city, and here we are all over the country, growing with no end in sight, and the future's bright. It's exciting to see that there's a glimmer of hope that with the right people, the dream of making the world a better place actually has a shot. It actually has a shot to become reality. With the amount of growth that we've had, being nationwide, creating a culture of sustainability, just creating that family feel that every individual has on their insight, and being able to take that nationwide and really worldwide in the foreseeable future. It's just humbling to see the end in mind play out.